Hello and welcome to the Families on the Horizon podcast. We're excited to help you transform your family's adventure from average to extraordinary. So I'm Jimmy and I'm joined by my co-host and partner in crime, Pauline, and we are super lucky to be traveling full-time with our two boys across Southeast Asia. And you can check out those adventures on our Mitches on the Horizon YouTube channel. So in today's episode, it's all going to be about full-time family travel. And a warning in advance, we're not just going to talk about the benefits and positives of this lifestyle.
We know that many families get caught up in the excitement and the potential of hitting the road, but often overlook the potential drawbacks of some of these nomadic lifestyles.
And that's why we're going to take a deep dive into the pros and cons of full-time travel, from financial considerations to emotional impacts on you and your loved ones. So let's get into this episode. What are the advantages of traveling full-time with your family? Well, the first thing we have here on our list is a lower cost of living in some countries. So one of the reasons we initially went on this trip and why we left Australia in the first place is because we were kind of getting priced out of the Australian market. The cost of living in Australia has jumped significantly since the start of COVID. With the amount of money that flowed into the economy, it made it very difficult for us to live in Australia and live to any kind of lifestyle. So one of the considerations we made when we decided to travel is like, can we travel and live as good, if not better quality of life for cheaper? And have you found that's been the case since we've been traveling?
Well, we've been doing the rough numbers lately, inputting our expenses and things like that. And we're probably sitting at only spending maybe just over half what we were spending in Australia. So that's a pretty significant lower cost way to live when you're looking at half of what we are living on.
And obviously not all travel is going to be like that. We're traveling through Southeast Asia, and generally the cost of living is a lot lower in Southeast Asian countries. But if you're doing a big lap of Australia, you may find that it actually works out to be the same, if not more.
Yeah, when you're looking at the fuel prices at the moment in some of those caravan parks, you have to stay and they've put their prices up. So yeah, it really just depends on the style of travel that you're doing.
But we really want to emphasize it's the cost of living. So like, I would argue that we are living more being traveling full time than we were when we were just in the rut, going through the motions, just sort of existing.
Yeah. There's no way we would have had the experiences that we've had in the past 4 months if we were still just at home.
Yeah. So I would say that the cost of living in the fact that we're doing and having experiences and spending time as a family is a lot lower when you travel than it is when you live at home and you're dropping kids off at school and you're doing all the rigmarole that comes with just earning a 9-to-5 income.
Surviving.
So the next thing we have here is one of the massive pros of traveling full-time as a family is immersing yourself in different cultures. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be a big change in culture like coming to Southeast Asia. This could just be traveling on the road and meeting other families that are traveling on the road as well in a caravan, say, for instance. But that has been one of the biggest things we've noticed since we've traveled full-time as a family through Southeast Asia is that we're basically surrounded by completely foreign and different cultures, which is A, taken us out of our comfort zone, but B, enriched our lives a lot.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something that we've noticed is...
And culture means everything from food to their traditions to, daily life, like all of that kind of stuff. There is a different way to look at culture in a sense because there's so many different things that make up culture, but just the different way of living is probably the biggest way to immerse yourself in it.
And I think sometimes you can get caught like you can in a rut with being at home. You can get caught in a cultural rut too. If you live in the same place for years and years on end and experience the same people and do the same routines and stuff, it starts to shape your view of the world. And one of the things that's happened to us since we've started traveling full time is our view of the world and the kids' view of the world has changed a lot. Just because we are we went from being insiders looking out back in Australia. We were insiders. We lived in the same place. We were from Mandurah and we had a view of the world that was from Mandurah out. We're now like outsiders looking in at different cultures, which gives you a different perspective. And you can only really get that when you're traveling for an extended period of time. Because if you travel for a week or two or something like that, yes, you get this.
You're still in the holiday mode, whereas we're kind of in the lifestyle.
Yeah,
would you class
we are
it
living
as?
our life in a different country,
Yeah.
in different countries, in different areas.
From people that don't understand the way we talk to a whole different diet to, it's just a completely different thing looking in. And you have to be very, very conscious of their cultures because you could do something very wrong and not even realize you're doing it.
Yeah, you can't just take your culture from the country you're from and just like insert it to X country that you're visiting or X place you're visiting. So just like cultural differences, you have to be aware of them. So you just by virtue of that, become more cultured, for lack of a better term.
One thing is shoes.
Yep.
We've noticed in Asia, you take your shoes off and you leave them outside because here roads, spaces are dirty and they do not want that coming into their house.
Yep.
So you take your shoes off as a sign of respect.
And we've just gotten used to doing that now.
Used to it.
And to be fair, it'll probably be just something we do at home.
We actually did it at home to an extent. So
But maybe not as hardcore as we do it here because you are walking through some pretty ordinary stuff around here and you don't want to drag that through your house. So the next thing we had here as a pro was the flexibility to work from anywhere.
Yeah.
By virtue of traveling full time, you have to have a way of earning income because unless you're independently wealthy,
an infinite amount of money,
yes,
you are not going to be traveling for an extended period of time.
so you just by virtue of that, you sort of build a way of working from anywhere, whether that's in the back of a caravan, in some caravan park, or like us remotely Southeast Asia with our own business. It forces you to work, get a job and get a career or start a business that can be done from anywhere, which by virtue creates a lot of freedom. So we have the freedom to basically go wherever we want now because we are traveling full time. But to get to this point where we were, we had to drop a lot of stuff that we were doing in Australia.
Yeah.
So like the 9 to 5 grind, there's a lot of people that aren't happy with that, but maybe don't know how to go from, or haven't had a trigger or a reason to go from the 9 to 5 to something that's maybe location independent. Setting traveling as a goal and wanting to go traveling as a goal might be that trigger that gets someone to go, yep, I'm done with the 9 to 5. I'm going to focus on the earning income outside. And we've done podcasts on this. It's one of the biggest pros of traveling full time is that to be able to do it, you kind of have to.
You have to, because you just never know what time your flight's going to be, if you're going to be delayed, whether you're going to have internet. That's our biggest one at the moment, is finding good internet. It is a pro, like that we can work anytime from anywhere. But then you also have to make sure that you have the flexibility that you can work from anywhere at any time without upsetting anyone.
Yeah, and it's a double-edged sword. There's definitely cons to having flexibility of working from anywhere and earning your income from anywhere. And we'll talk about that in a sec because, like I said, a lot of people talk about the pros and it's exciting to go traveling and things like that. But not many people cover off the cons of doing this.
There's a lot of things to consider.
Yeah. And the final pro we had here, and there's obviously lots more pros, but these are the big ones for us, is educational opportunities for the kids.
Oh, so many opportunities.
There is nothing wrong with traditional schooling.
No, not at all.
But I would say that our boys in this last 4 months have learned probably more than they would have at school, at a traditional school, sitting in a desk, learning a structured curriculum.
Yeah.
Because we just came back from a place called Sakal and in Sabah, and they went into the jungle. They learned about orangutans. They
literally just had a geography, a bioscience, a biological, biology lesson, science, social studies, history, literally all wrapped up into one in the space of a week.
And they're touching and feeling, and they're interacting with that. So it's a lot. I know it's stuff that they're going to retain and remember for a long time because they're not just reading about orangutans in a book. They've gone out.
Images. They've gone and seen them.
They've physically seen them with their own eyes. They've seen how they move. They've seen how they look like humans. They've seen how strong they are. That's stuff that's very hard to replicate with YouTube and channels.
Yeah.
And again, if you're going caravanning full time and you go to Uluru, you can learn about Uluru in a book. But going to it,
standing there looking at it at sunrise is going to be a completely different situation to looking at it in a book.
Yep. So there's definitely, I think, pros to that, and especially when you've got children that maybe don't learn as well in a traditional setting, or they, maybe they have ADHD or autism or something like that. Being able to curate that education, to them as parents, has a lot of benefits. And we've seen that in our children, especially, is like we can go at their own pace. So if there's things they're struggling with, we can focus on it more. If they're excelling in areas, we just keep pushing on.
Yeah.
And that's a massive pro in my eyes. And one of my best mate is a teacher, and we had this argument before we left about the value of teachers and traditional education. And there's definitely a value in it.
There is definitely.
You need your kids need to not know how to read and write and do arithmetic and learn how to handwrite and stuff. But like I explained to my mate, we're not teachers, and we don't pretend to be teachers.
No.
We're never going to be able to deliver education as well as a teacher. But like I explained to my mate, we're teaching 2 children. We have 2 boys that are 6 and 8, and we're teaching 2 children. Do you not think that we love those children to death too, by the way, obviously? Do you not think that two parents of children that they genuinely care about and want to see them succeed are not going to put in as much effort as a teacher? And whether we deliver that curriculum as well as a teacher is irrelevant. We'll make up for that in just wanting to make sure that they succeed. And we're not going to let our children not succeed, fail. And we're not going to fail them by not giving them a good education. So the beauty about that is if you actually do enjoy teaching and learning things, you can really pass that on to your children and teach them to think critically and find information for themselves. And, like the boys have started using Google now. So like if they don't know the answer to a question, they go and Google it and find out and research it themselves. The boys ask lots of questions when we're traveling around. What is this, and what is the biggest of this, and how big is the KL Tower?
Yeah.
What tonight?
Why does the sun bear have such a long tongue?
Let's find out. I don't know.
Who knows?
So let's find out. But like Liam tonight, he's having a growth spurt clearly because he has sore legs. And he said, we're talking about how big he wants to get. And he's like, I want to be as big as the KL Tower. And then he come running out and he goes, Mum, how big is the KL Tower? and I knew the answer because I remembered it. But Mum Googled it. It's like 421 meters.
And he's like, I'm going to be 421 meters. So we're like, okay.
So like those kinds of things, I feel like, nothing against school, but you got 30 children in a class. Most of the energy and attention goes to the kids that are playing up. Yes. And if their kids are quiet, falling behind. And our kids, one of our children, Riley, is quite quiet. We didn't realize how far he was falling behind until we took over his education.
Yeah, because he just doesn't speak up. And then because he's so happy and so nice to be around, that no one really wants to tell him that he needs to pick his game up. Like no one was pushing him. So he was just doing his own thing and we didn't even realize. And
then we took over the education and we found some gaps, which we've been filling around math and things like that, handwriting. And, he's on his way. He's come out of his shell a lot. He's asking a lot more questions. So, that's definitely a pro. The other thing, I'm just going to add this to this same point is, your kids spend 6 hours a day at school. You spend 8 hours generally at work, if you're lucky. That's like 6 hours that you're not spending with your children.
Yeah.
And what we're finding is it's actually quite nice to have the children here learning next to us, because it's 6 hours a day that we get back with our children and interacting with them. Even if they're learning and we're working, we're still next to each other. We're still talking. We're still having conversations. We're still helping them with their school. So there's an extra, for the last 6 months, 4 months, we've had an extra 6 hours a day with our children that we wouldn't have gotten if we weren't traveling.
Plus, you really have to factor in the time that you stand around in the kitchen making lunch boxes, ferrying them to school, ferrying them to sport, and all those extra things. You actually feel like you're with your child, but you're really not because there's so many other things going on.
Yes.
So I think we're getting back more than 6 hours.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
That's one of the other pros of traveling full time is you don't realize, you find you have a lot more time than when you did at home. And mainly it's the time of transit, traveling to and from school, traveling to and from work, the making of dinners, all that stuff. You don't do that anymore. When you're traveling full time, you kind of just work as your own little central nucleus. Yeah. You get food in or whatever, or you may make a lunch here and there, but You're not traveling to work. You're not traveling to school. It's all in one spot.
Yeah.
So you find you spend more time together.
We even all did the laundry as a family the other day.
Because we were waiting for our Airbnb to open up. So like you just find that you spend a lot more time together. And I suppose it's maybe that you don't spend more time together. It just exposes how little time you spend together when you're in the 9 to 5 grind. So those are some of the pros of full-time travel. Obviously there's more, and make sure to leave it in the comments, or if you like, leave it some feedback on some of the other pros you've noticed traveling full-time, because we'd love to hear them. Now, like I said, there's a lot of pros, but there's also cons. There's some serious cons to traveling full-time that most people don't speak about, because it is, you paint a certain picture when on social media. So
you want to show everyone that you're having the absolute best time, but no one sees you crying in the corner because you can't find accommodation.
Yeah.
Right?
So let's talk about that. It's a good segue talking about the kids. So we'll start with the kids, and that's homesickness and missing family and friends.
Yeah.
So that's a real thing, right? I don't necessarily suffer from it as badly as maybe Pauline does, because I've always been a bit of a hermit. So like I quite just, as long as I'm with my family, I'm good.
Yeah.
But you were saying the other day that you're actually getting a little bit homesick.
Yeah, I've kind of hit a point like you can only, do video calls and messages for so long, kind of thing, that you still want that interaction. Like it's amazing us as a family unit, but I didn't realize how much time I actually like spending with family and friends, like just having different conversations to what we have and seeing different people and that kind of stuff, and just that connection. And I think the kids are having it a little bit as well. Riley asks about his best friend all the time, and then Liam asks about his friends as well. So we've obviously gotten to a point, like we've been 4 months, so there's obviously these emotions that you go on as a roller coaster, and we're just in a point that, there was a few issues that we had, and people brought it back to like, oh, well, I actually miss this person kind of thing. So there's definitely that as a con.
And obviously you can suppress those feelings and you make it up. Like there is pros that outweigh those cons, but it is a good point. Like the boys don't see as many children as they did when they were at home.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Like they spend a lot of time with us and a lot of time with adults, but they're not spending time with children, because we're so transient that when we do meet kids, for like a day or two, and then they're off. Then they're moving on and we're moving on.
Yeah.
So that is, socialization is a thing. Now, is it as big a deal as some people make it out to be in the, of one of the cons of homeschooling? I don't think so, because they see a lot of adults and they interact with a lot of adults. But I do feel a little bit sad for the boys that they're not be able to just go to the play yard and just play soccer with their friends from school.
Even like team sports and things like that, like they're missing out on that side of it. So yeah, we have gotten to a point where we're starting to realize this kind of stuff.
Yep. And we're going to try and make more of an effort to get them engaged with other children. Like when we go to a place, we look for homeschool groups and look for other families to chat to and things like that. But, we're all in the same boat. We're moving in and out of places. All the families that are traveling around the world and traveling in caravans and things like that are all in and out. We're trying to get them engaged with their friends through things like Roblox and things like that.
Yeah, Kids Messenger, games that they want to play. We're even trying like on the Switch if they can play online with their friends and that kind of stuff. So there's all these kind of avenues, but it's still not the same as them being around them. Because,
and we're conscious of that.
Yeah, and technology, it really is such a short attention span thing, and especially it's exacerbated in kids. Like tonight we're having a video call with their friends and they literally were like popping in and out on my phone because they just can't concentrate, whereas when they're actually standing in front of the other person,
you can't just zip in and out of conversation.
In and out of conversation. So yeah, technology is great, but the actual like person connection is what we're
so with homesickness and missing family and friends is something you have to be mentally prepared for, because you will experience it when you're traveling full time. It's just inevitable. You spend 4 months away from your family. It's bound to come up. Even myself, I've noticed I've been calling mum a lot more.
You have actually,
because I do miss my mum and my parents and my friends and things like that. I just miss them in a different way to Pauline. I think it's more just checking in on them, make sure they're okay. So the next thing we have here is financial instability and uncertainty.
Yeah.
So the flip side of not having a solid 9-to-5 job, while most 9-to-5 jobs sucks, is you generally have a level of security having a 9-to-5 job and just maybe working at Bunnings or just working in a 9-to-5 job. There's security laws that protect you from getting the sack and getting fired. You don't have those securities when you're traveling full time.
It's very, very sporadic. So, you could have some months where you do really well and you get paid and, customers pay their invoices on time. And then you might have a month where all of a sudden you've lost a few customers and the money isn't coming in like it was. So there really is that instability in the flow of money, especially when you need money every single day.
Yep.
Like when you travel, there's not a day goes by that you can't do without money, because obviously you've got to spend accommodation. That's the biggest one. And then you've got to eat as well. So yeah, you need to know where that money's coming.
Yeah, and I think this is a big myth with traveling full-time, is that people think, oh, we're not going to spend money, free caravan sites and free. It's like you still spend money.
It adds up.
And it adds up. And
because you've got to go to the laundry. So you think, doing laundry at home, it hasn't really cost me that much because I've already bought the washing powder and already have the washing machine. However, the washing machine was a massive purchase and you buy washing powder liquid every week. You kind of factor that in. We've got to factor that in like every 3 days, that it's going to cost us like $4 to $5 just to do our laundry.
Yeah.
So that money's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah. And, the uncertainty and insecurity, instability, yes, it's probably amplified when you're traveling full time, but everyone faces that at some point. You've got the added element here of being in a foreign country. So like not in your home base. So like, you can't just hunker down. Like if financially something goes wrong,
I can't just walk out the door and go to my local supermarket and say, do you have any jobs available?
Yep. So like you're basically on your own. Yeah. So like if there's insecurity, instability, we've met a couple that had to go back to their home country because they basically ran out of money.
Yep.
So like it's not like like you said, walk into a job, get a job or whatever. If you run out of money when you're on the road, that's the end of the trip.
That's it.
You've got to go back and you've got to go and earn it.
Yeah.
So like that's a real thing. The way you buffer yourself from that is by having a lot of cash saved up. Yeah. But not everyone's in a position to do that. But just definitely a con, and definitely something that you have to be mentally prepared for, because you do have months where you're like, oh, like there's no cash coming in. Yeah, we've had a pretty good time and now we've got a gap in our finances.
Yeah.
So the budgeting and getting out of debt, we've spoken about this last episode, is all important stuff. Next thing we have here is limited personal space and privacy. We have spent more time together as a family than I think we've ever done in our life. Paulie and I have spent more time together as a couple than we have in our other time in our life, literally 24 hours a day.
It's literally, we get on the plane and we sit next to each other. We get on a bus. We sit next to each other.
We record a podcast. Sitting next to each other.
Work. We sleep in the same bed. I've now realised how much Jimmy steals blankets. Like, that was not an issue before, but it is now. Like, it's just, this is what you deal with. And then adding the kids on top of that, who just want to now climb all over us and hug us and be literally like a leech.
Yeah.
And you're just like, I just need 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes.
So it's things we've done to mitigate that, because that's something you have to be. So why we got it as a con is because it is quite a thing confronting. If you travel with a significant other and you're not completely comfortable with them, it will be exposed when you travel.
It will be
because you are going to be together 24/7, and all the little things that annoy them about you are going to annoy them, and vice versa. So if you don't have a rock solid relationship going into traveling, it's gonna expose all the little chinks in the armor.
Yeah.
Now we're very lucky because we've traveled together full time for 7 months about 10 years ago, and so all those little chinks in the armor, we kind of know what we're getting ourselves into. So it hasn't been as big an issue for us as it maybe will be for others. But if you've never spent an extended period of time together in each other's pocket, that's what I call it.
We've also worked together in the business.
Yeah. We spent a lot of time together back in Australia. Yeah. But I know there's couples out there that maybe don't.
Yeah, well, they both go their separate ways to a separate job. One would drop off the kids to school. One, would do this, and then they'd kind of come home and meet at nighttime, but then still do their separate things, like watch TV or play on their computer. So they're not really like next to each other kind of thing. Like they're living separate lives in one life, but we're literally living our lives
as one human being, basically. And so, like, just be conscious of that, because that one will make or break your trip.
Yeah.
You know, if you grow to resent your significant other when you're traveling, it becomes an issue because you can't just leave each other. You know, it's not like, oh, I get to go to work or whatever. If you literally work next to each other, sleep next to each other, bathe next to each other, you know, 24/7, there's not.
It's where you need to find some kind of balance. So I go grocery shopping by myself because I get to go for a walk by myself, which is nice and peaceful. I get to pick the groceries. Like, I ask people what they want before I go there, so there's no hiccups in that one. But then I get to walk around and I get to do the grocery shopping by myself and come back. You know, that's just one thing I do. You know, and there's other things like I'll take the kids down to the pool so that Jimmy can get some work done without them annoying him. Like you've got to find some stuff that you can do that will help the other person out just for that 5-10 minutes, half an hour, whatever it is, because you spend so much time together all the time. And really the next thing that we need to do is actually separate the kids and take one kid somewhere and one kid somewhere else, because they are literally living on top of each other.
And we're lucky. We are very, very lucky that our kids get along. And they get along like very closely. And this trip will make them closer, I think. But I know that there's kids out there that are like oil and water. And when you put them in a room,
put them together,
literally shoulder to shoulder in a boat for 3 hours at a time, you know, that's one thing everyone mentioned when we went to this recent tour that we did, is like how well behaved our kids were. Well, they weren't technically that well behaved. They just they just didn't argue with each other. But they just got along. So like they weren't. I think they're used to kids coming on there and like picking each other and things like that,
having fights and yelling and screaming. Whereas ours don't do that.
No,
they kind of just annoy each other, and then just don't want to talk to each other, or one puts the hand over the other one's mouth and then they get annoyed. And like,
they do what kids do. Right? So, but where we're noticing it is like they don't have any personal space.
No, not
so. At home, they'd have their own room or whatever. They'd have areas of the house they can go to. They have friends they can see. They don't kind of get that here. So that's something we need to work on, is getting, like you said, taking splitting them up and getting them to do that. The other thing we've done more of, and this is more just for our own sanity's sake, is like telling them to give us distance. So like they'll be right next to us like this, and I'm like, Liam, it's too hot, because it is.
They'll literally be like bear hugging
it's like
you, and you're like, we know you love us, we know you want to hug, but you don't have to be here all the time.
Trying to wean them off us somewhat, which is a good and bad thing, but they're getting used to that now, and they kind of understand when it's time to hug and when it's time to like actually let's not walk shoulder to shoulder down a mall. Let's give ourselves a little bit of distance. So we're learning that as we go, but it's definitely a con, right? Like you don't have, if you're used to having a lot of space and you're used to going to a job and your kids are used to going to school, it's quite confronting to be plonked in a caravan or a single room apartment together for a month. You know, it's not just 1 or 2 days. You're going to be doing this for a month, and all the little chinks in the armor, all the little insecurities you have. You might have, you know, it might be something stupid and dumb, like you've never taken a poo in front of your partner. And then all of a sudden you're confronted with you having to do that. And it's like, oh no, what do I do now? It's like things like that. You don't think about it, but they're the things you have.
Things,
Yep, 100%. And then the one of the things we had on here was potential challenges with education for kids. So the flip side of this is obviously there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of ways to help your children grow through education. But there is challenges with educating your own children.
Especially when they don't listen.
You know, it really tests your patience as a parent. This is why I have a lot of respect for teachers, is like, kids are hard to deal with at the best of times, let alone trying to teach them stuff. There'll be days where I know for a fact I thought Liam had something math-wise, and then the next day it's like I don't know how to do it.
Completely out the door, and you're like, we learned this yesterday. And the listening at the moment, is just it's not there. Like you could tell Riley something 3 to 4 times, and he's still not listening. And you ask him to listen, and he still doesn't listen. So it can get very, very frustrating, and there is massive challenges when it comes to education, but you just have to try different things. We've had to try different methods and overcome.
The other thing with that too is there's we're not the good things about schools is they have all the equipment, they have all the resources. So, they have pens and paper, they have beakers for science experiments. They have
able to print out a picture.
Yeah. So we're limited in what we can do logistically because we can't carry a printer with us.
Or craft.
We only have so much room. So there is challenges in enriching our children with education. So we know that they're learning their arithmetic and their reading and things like that. But, are they learning in the most optimal way for them? It's hard because we rely on computers and pen and paper, basically. That's what we do. Whereas, we don't have access to times table sheets and that kind of stuff.
There's amazing printouts.
Yeah, we don't have access to that.
Art rooms and music rooms and sports classes and all that kind of stuff. We have to go in search of those kinds of things. So it is a challenge.
And little things I had growing up, I did chess lessons and things like that.
Yeah.
We have to do all that stuff to enrich our children. Or we have to pay a company like OutSchool to do it, which is very expensive. So there is negatives to the educating. I personally think the positives outweigh the negatives, but there is certainly negatives.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And I'm going to do a full video on that because I think parents need to understand the ramifications of teaching their own children.
Yeah.
But I think it's worth it.
And finding the right program or...
That could be a whole series of videos.
A whole series.
So, obviously, we've spoken about a few cons. We believe in being pragmatic with this stuff and going it's not all roses.
No.
Now, there is things that you can do to make full-time travel work for you as a family, to make this transition easier.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I wish someone had told us before we do is there's little cheat codes and little ways to eliminate a lot of those, the effect of those cons. Yes. And one of those is budgeting and savings. We talked about financial instability and uncertainty as one of the biggest cons of traveling like this and the stress that causes. Well, the bigger financial buffer you have before you leave makes a massive difference. And then when you're actually on your trip, sticking to a budget.
Yeah. It is actually really quite hard to do when you're on the road, just because you fall into so many issues of a flight getting expensive or missing a train ticket and having to buy another one. Accommodation that all of a sudden didn't work out and you need to wait for a refund on that and then find something else that's not, you're booking last minute, so it might be out of your budget, so you're paying through the nose. So there is just so many budgeting issues that you can have, but you need to be able to know that, okay, I've had a bad day today and I've spent over my budget. Right, well, let's hunker down and not do too much for the next 2 or 3 days. Let's just go to the pool that's at our apartment or go for a walk or, find a walking tour that's free, go and see the sights, that kind of stuff. You kind of need it. Then there needs to be a balance in your budget that, okay, we've spent 3 days over budget, right? The next 3 days, it's got to be, basic life as usual kind of thing. And then saving strategies, well, really, you can't leave without some kind of money behind you to at least know, okay, we've got 3 months worth of spending money. If all fails, that's what we can fall back on. And then knowing, okay, each month if I do X amount of work, roughly I'll get this much. So what's the shortfall? How much do I need to make to keep us going? Or can I use that buffer of savings to keep going for the next 6 months?
Yeah.
There just needs to be strategies in place.
You also need to think about this fact is do you have enough saved up that if you had to fly, if all of you had to fly home and not be able to pick the budget flights and just get home, do you have enough saved up to book a flight home or to book a flight and accommodation in a certain place because one of the kids gets sick and you have to stay in a place that you didn't expect to? You need that buffer to be able to do that. I'm comfortable in the fact that if something happened, say a second COVID happened and we all had to fly home and just pick up very expensive flights, we could all get home and safely and get all our stuff home. It would be very expensive, but we could do it.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have to be like, oh my God, where are we going to find this money to be able to do that? Yeah. That's why you need the savings too. Because if you don't have that, then it's actually quite risky to travel.
Of course.
So
it's even talking about medical again. A lot of hospitals and doctors over here will not treat you without money up front. Yes, you have travel insurance that's going to pay you back, but how long is that payback going to take, and how much are you forking out to start off with just to get seen at the hospital in an emergency? So where's that money going to come from if you have to make a claim and wait for travel insurance?
And that goes for Australia too.
Yeah.
Like next thing you're from Western Australia or something, and then you go to New South Wales and you don't have an ambulance cover. Yeah. Next thing, $1,000
right there.
So it's like, it's not just an international thing. It's like you've got to have a buffer.
Yeah.
The next thing we got on here is, I put on here was finding the right destinations for your family. So the reason I put this on here is to tie back to what we were saying about the limited personal space and, like being in each other's pockets.
Yeah, and what your family likes to do. Yeah. Like every family likes to do certain things. So you might like to go out into nature. You might like theme parks. You might
like to go to resorts.
You might only travel to resorts. Your family will always have a niche. It might go outside of that niche for a few days because you've seen something interesting, but you actually need to find the right destination or location for your family. Otherwise, you might not have a good time.
Yep.
Or you might just spend your time sitting inside because there's nothing there that you actually wanted to do.
And you have to be honest about this too. There's a lot of families that we meet, us included, we get caught in this. It's like, oh, we want to do nature walks. We want to go and see the nature and stuff like that. And it's like, actually get there. It's like, actually, I'd rather just stay in the hotel.
It's too hot. And I'm too sweaty and I don't want to go out during the middle of the day. Like, you actually have to be truthful to yourself. Are you going to go on a walk at 12 noon in Southeast Asia? No, you're not, because it is too hot and it is too sweaty and the kids are not going to like it and you're not going to enjoy it. So think of what you can actually achieve and what you actually have fun doing.
We met this awesome family and they're still awesome, to be fair. And they just love nature. Yeah. So they go out and they're going to places. They'll pick their location. Yeah, they'll pick their locations based on what nature walks and stuff are there. And I can sit here and pretend like that's us. But it's not. I'd much rather go to a theme park and like slide down slides all day than walk it through the jungle. Yeah. So, but that doesn't mean we don't like that. We just do it. We just have a different modality. So when we wanted to see the jungle, instead of walking through it, we drove through it or did a boat. Yeah. So we enjoyed the same things. We just had different execution.
Of doing it.
Yeah. Yes. So you need to be honest with that, and you can't pretend to be something you're not. So being honest about that and finding the right destinations for your family. If your family enjoys resorts,
beach, or going and finding the best theme parks, then you have to stay true to that, because otherwise you are not going to have any fun.
Yep. And the next thing I got on here is choosing the right accommodation. And the reason for that is, the limited personal space and privacy can be mitigated by getting a bigger place.
This is correct. Yep.
So, be honest with yourself and going like, okay, well, we're used to living in a big 1,000 square meter or 300 square meter house. Are we going to be okay with living in something that's 50 square meters? Yeah. Or has one bedroom because it's cheaper?
Not having access to a washing machine that's inside your apartment. You're going to have to go to the laundry every 3 days. The grocery shop, you don't have a car, so it needs to be walking distance. Like, the daily stuff that is quite easy in your lifestyle at the moment, you need to make it easy in your travel lifestyle as well, because you're going to hit roadblocks. And we have found that out in the past few days. Like, trying to find accommodation that suits us is very, very difficult.
To keep in budget.
If
we had an infinite budget.
An infinite budget.
But we try and stick true to the budget, especially when it comes to accommodation. Yep. And that causes us to look for days and days to find the exact right accommodation.
And then we lose the one that we might have liked because someone else books it and all this kind of stuff. So there's a whole other episode we're going to do on accommodation and maybe different ways of finding accommodation outside of the normal channels, because we have stumbled across a few in the past few days. So, you really need to have a set limitation or list or wish list, whatever it is, of what you want in your accommodation that will keep everyone happy.
Yeah. And it just reminds me of the family that we watched on YouTube that booked accommodation in Chiang Mai out in the suburbs.
Oh, yeah.
And they lasted out there. They did it because it was cheaper and it was a bigger house. But then they had to cart their own water. They weren't close to anything. So they had to buy a car. And then they lasted about 3 weeks and then went back to their home country because it was too much.
It was too much. They were used to walking to the shops. They could no longer do it. They were used to having restaurants all around them, and all of a sudden they were in the middle of suburbia. There was nothing out there like buses or public transport, so they had to buy a car. So all these things add up to you not having that great experience.
Yep.
And all of a sudden you're going to throw in the towel because it's too hard. You have to make it easy and enjoyable, otherwise you're not going to do it. Like, I am not going to walk to a shop that's 3 kilometers away and cart all my food back because it's just too hard.
Yep.
We've also then found, yes, there's apps out there that get you food delivered, but a lot of the food that we want is sometimes unavailable through their apps. You actually have to walk into store to get them. So you have to balance that. If I live further away from this shop, am I going to be able to get my groceries that I want? Or is there a corner store that maybe is closer that I might get something? So there's just, like I said, you've got to find the right accommodation.
Yep. And the final thing that will make travel work better for you and your family's unique needs and circumstances is to balance work and travel.
Yeah.
The thing with traveling full time is it's not a vacation.
No.
And it's not living at home.
No.
So it's this weird middle bit between like
a lifestyle.
Yeah, it's like a purgatory thing where you're like not technically working, but you're not technically on a vacation either. You're kind of in this middle bit. So learning how to balance work and travel is probably been the hardest thing we've had to get right, but we're getting pretty close to that now.
Yeah.
You know, we work during the day. We basically work during the week, or we work for 3 or 4 day spurts, and then we go and do some stuff. We kind of like treat it as if we're at home with the work hours, and then we just go and do stuff afterwards.
Yeah, they'll be like, you know, we do a 7 till 2 or a 9 till 3 or something like that work day, and then we go and find something to do that might then involve dinner as well, and we've done our activity for the afternoon and had dinner, and you come back and you go to bed and that kind of stuff. So they're just we know that there's this social presence and everyone wants to show off their wonderful travel life, but there's actually things that need to be done. You are technically still working and you are technically still homeschooling your children, and that needs to take priority over the travel.
Yeah.
So you need to work around timings, what you can and can't do, and just factor that in. It took us a while to get our heads around that because we were like, we want to see all this stuff, but we've still got to do all this work. So how are we going to fit this in? And we don't feel like the kids are going outside enough, and the guilt runs through you, and you just have to figure out a way of balancing that.
And I think it's not doing a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
But it's not doing anything either, no work either. It's like like the way we're kind of doing it now is that like there's days for working and then there's days for vacation. Now, what ratio those are, it really just depends on what we have on. But we may do a day, like today, I basically worked from 9 till 5 pretty much to catch up on stuff, even though it's a Saturday.
Yeah.
One thing you get used to when you're traveling full time is all the days end up just being the same. We don't have weekends anymore because every day is kind of a weekend. Yeah. So like I don't care if it's a Sunday.
Doesn't really shut down.
No, there's no shutting down.
Everyone still works, so it's not like Australia where everyone's like, oh, the weekend, let's not do anything. No, Asia's still alive.
Yeah, so I've gotten over the like, I should be relaxing because it's a Saturday. It's like, no, it's like all the days kind of are weekdays.
Yeah.
You know, because we have like, they're kind of the weekday and the weekend at the same time. It's weird. It's sort of the most interesting thing about the traveling is like, I don't even know what day it is half the time. I don't know what date it is.
Yeah.
So we just work when we need to work and when things are on. And then we just balance that around like, so like if we want to go and visit something, we just plan around that. So like, okay, we want to go to a theme park for the whole day. Yeah. Well, we're obviously not going to work on that day.
Yeah.
So we'll just work around it and work on the other days and things like that. So yeah, I think that balancing the work and travel is something, if you get right, will make your whole travel experience so much easier, because that part of it, you need to, unless you're very fortunate and you don't have to work, that's going to be a big part of it. Same with homeschool. It's like you've got to work around that. Yeah. So definitely balancing those two is a big part of that.
Yeah, and I've got one more thing to say on that balancing the work. If you're a person that says, oh, I'll have plenty of time at night time to do my work,
Bomb.
You really don't. Like, we have said that so many times, but by the time we have dinner and put the kids to bed, it's like 8 to 8:30, and you kind of want to be in bed by like 10 or 11.
Yep.
That's not a whole lot of time to work, then wind down and get into bed without your head absolutely spinning because you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't get this done, and I don't want to, and then you don't sleep. Like,
Yep.
and then that rolls into the next thing and the next thing, and it's just, you have to be realistic of balancing this work and travel, because you say, oh, I'll just work at night, or oh, I'll get up earlier in the morning. If you're not that type of person, don't do it. Like,
Yeah.
just go,
That's a great point.
I work from 9 to 1 and that's my best time. Work 9 to 1, right? Don't think that you're going to work late hours into the night or wake up early in the morning and everything's going to get done. Like, it just work to your strength.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a really good point. Because you the thing with before you leave is you have no idea.
You have no
That's
idea.
why we're making this podcast, to give people a few different, like a real perspective on what it's like to travel full time and how to have a good extended holiday, vacation, things like that. If you don't know what to expect, then you start to make your own idea in your head of what it's going to be like. I didn't find out there's nothing like that when you actually leave.
Yeah.
So
You think it's going to be roses and sprinkles and rainbows and everything's going to work out fine. It doesn't work like that.
no, it doesn't.
Like, it doesn't work like that.
It's hard. Traveling full time is hard work, but it's well worth it.
Yeah, of course.
But this has been way more stressful than we thought it was going to be.
Yes.
But we wouldn't have not done it because we've had some life-changing experiences. But it's hard work. It's hard work traveling.
And we're saying it's hard work because we've literally lived and breathed it for the past 4 months. And, if you don't book accommodation in advance, you're going to have a shortfall of where do we live? It's going to cost me more to go to this place. Like, oh, I haven't booked my airfare. What do we do? Like, you just run into all these issues. So if you don't plan or you don't spend a day actually organizing your trip, which you don't want to do because you just want to have this magical holiday, nothing works out. Like, nothing works out to your favor, and you just feel like everything's falling apart.
Yep, 100%. So hopefully we've given you a bit of an insight into some of the pros and cons and some of the ways you can mitigate some of those cons. Like I said at the start of this video, we really just wanted to paint a picture of what it's really like. Yeah. Definitely don't want you to not travel.
Of course.
Don't let the cons scare you. But if you're conscious of it, then you can work on things at home before you leave on the trip to make the cons less of an issue.
Maybe you book 3 months of accommodation and all your flights in advance, and then once you're a month in, you go, okay, I need another month worth of accommodation, because maybe you say, I need 3 months buffer so I don't get stressed out. Whatever that is, whatever you think is going to make your trip so stressful, work on that and sort that out before you go.
Maybe you watch your partner go to the toilet more often.
Maybe.
No, that might be the other thing too.
Maybe, you get used to your clothes smelling really bad and sitting next to someone on a plane or a car ride or something for 8 hours. I don't know, whatever it is.
Whatever gets you used to those cons. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in to the Families on the Horizon podcast today. As you weigh the pros and cons of full-time travel with your family, it's important to remember that there's no right answer. Every family is different. Yeah. However, we hope that our discussion today has given you some valuable insights and things to consider when you plan your next adventure. So make sure to join us next time on the Families on the Horizon podcast for more tips and inspiration for having not so average family adventures. And